Nice weather. And nice beaches. And you can get to the beaches. But other than that, it's dirty, it's crowded, there's traffic. The government is.
We are ready whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Visit East Germany.
All right, we'll call to order the September 21st, 5 p.m. workshop for the City of Council. This is in reference to the budget discussion, and I will turn it over to Jenny.
Thank you, Mayor Ryan. Good evening, members of the council. Tonight we will talk about the budget again, and in the hopes of getting to a point where we can set a preliminary levy. I'm just going to go over high level how we'll go through tonight's workshop, and then we'll kind of pass back and forth between staff questions, council questions. We'll just kind of go with the flow. If I could request that I have about 15-20 minutes before the regular meeting, in the hopes that we'll decide where we want to set the preliminary levy, and then I just need to finalize the resolution that I can get ready and have for our regular meeting. So I just need a little bit of time to do that. So for tonight, kind of reflective in same as in your packet, I will start off by going over the new budget expenditure items. That document has been updated since our August meeting. So I will go over kind of high level how I put it together. I tried to make it clear. However, there's a little bit of explanation I think that needs to go along with that. Then we'll have time for questions with police, public works, and parks departments. And then I'll come back and talk about budget and levy impacts. I've ran some scenarios with the budget. So you can see what that looks like based on a few different scenarios, depending on what the council would like. I included in your packet some different tax impact scenarios based on different levy percentages. So we can talk about any of those in more detail if you have questions on those. And then, like I mentioned, hopefully by the end, we'll have direction on where to set that preliminary levy. Questions as we get started? Perfect. So the item that I wanted to at least kick off our discussion tonight is the new budget expenditure items. On the left half of the sheet reflects the initial list of items that was presented to the council in August. What I did first after that discussion was I removed any items under $5,000 and then just determined if we could incorporate those things or not. I think everything ended up either getting incorporated, or we determined we could purchase some of those items in our 2021 budget. So some of the smaller items got removed, but it helped to then focus the council's time on the bigger items. There were a couple of items you'll note on the right-hand side where we said purchase in 2021. So these are items that were more than $5,000, but we were able to purchase them in 2021. As you might remember, we talked about the K-9 process and how originally we had put that in our operating budget for next year, but we had also talked about using police reserve funds for that. So I wanted to at least identify that that was moving forward and the money reflective, but it's not going to be in the budget for the initial purchase of the dog and the equipment and et cetera. We're able to place an order for the Bobcat attachments in Public Works. So that was a nice item to check off the list. And I believe we also were able to purchase a laptop and some technology for Public Works as well. So that was another thing to be able to check off the list. What I did was I color coded for each department between police, Public Works, and at the bottom kind of all citywide items based on the information that was provided to you by the department heads. And I will let them talk to about each of their items specifically, but I wanted to at least prioritize them for you. And hopefully the color coding helps just to focus within each department. So Craig and Tom can talk about their items. I will talk about mine on the bottom just briefly. The one other thing I wanted to highlight on this sheet is the blue font. We talked last budget workshop about Public Works equipment matrix. And without a visual, I know it was a challenge to explain, but when we look at the individual equipment purchases themselves, the dollars isn't necessarily those exact dollars that go into the budget, because we look at it from a big picture, all the items, and we come up with an average on an annual cost. So there's one line item that's below that line 7, the 7th priority, that says $11,470. That is the increase to the equipment matrix cost that would then incorporate those equipment needs for next year. I included that vehicle equipment matrix sheet in your packet as well, that we can go through if you have more questions on that. But it's not as if, the $72,000 truck, it doesn't translate into $72,000. So I tried to at least show you which of those items reflects in that total cost that we look at, that average cost. So I hope that makes sense, and we can talk about that more if you'd like. For the items at the bottom in the purple, these are some of the council goals, strategic plan process items that we were able to, I'm going to say complete, or at least get to a point now where I can put them in final form. And these are some of the initiatives citywide that we have implemented with this budget process. So the items that are identified as number 1, the 10-year capital improvement plan for all departments, we have implemented that. And then the goal of establishing a compensation study schedule, reviewing city ordinances on a rotating basis, and reviewing city policies on a rotating basis. Those are all items that I believe we'll be able to put into final form and before the end of the budget cycle. And what I mean by that is I would create a resolution to just document that we have achieved that goal in that process. I think that would just give it kind of a final completeness to that, and also to help us going forward. Okay, we have a policy rotating on a rotating basis schedule. What does that look like? So those items that are identified as the first priority for me, more as a completion thing than anything. Items labeled 2 and 3. So the number 2 items, install a new key system. We're working on that with Widseth doing our facility study, but that is a goal that I'd like to have accomplished in 2022. And safety training program for all staff. We should be able to do that with minimal additional investment. So that would be the second step of the second round of goals or priorities from my perspective. And then the third one would be the 20-year downtown comprehensive plan. I think that's really important and a good idea for us to keep discussing along with other departments, especially parks, planning and zoning, as we've had similar conversations about other things. So that would come third on my priority list as we move forward. You may have noticed in your regular council packet that there's a resolution in the consent calendar establishing that parks reserve account and the community center reserve account. So I'd like to do, so that's to give you an idea of where my thought was and my idea for completing these things. That's how we would document it. I am also working on something similar for planning and zoning, because they have, planning and zoning department has responsibility for a comprehensive plan. Brittany shared that she'd like to work on the future land use map, housing study, those things. So that would also maybe be a good idea to establish a reserve account for that as well, as we kind of develop that more. So any questions on my list of items at the bottom? I know those are things we've talked about, but I would just take a moment to see if anything needs clarification.
Is there anything in here that we can use the money from the federal government for the COVID? We got $400,000. Is there anything here that we can use that money for to help?
Specifically with my list, yes, potentially the new key system. I mean, security improvement measures, anything that has to do with public access to city buildings could potentially, yes. So we would definitely look at that option when the time came to see if Yeah, well, I do have use reserve funds or the ARPA money. So yeah, any opportunity we can, we definitely want to take a look at that since we haven't talked a lot about what potential uses we have for those funds yet.
Have they gotten back to you with, I mean, do they have a clear picture of what we can use it for?
Fair question. I know that's continual to be developed and Maggie might be able to share a little bit more or I I don't put you on the spot, but I know she's been on a couple webinars.
It changes.
There's a lot of rules and they're changing day to day. The biggest things I would say is obviously, remote working, water, sewer, and broadband. The county was doing a study at one point in time about broadband countywide, so there might be something that we can participate in a piece of that, but the rules are forever changing every time I watch it, and the rules are like 182 pages.
So you said water and sewer. Is there any way to use some of that money towards the, when we're gonna look at possibly city water?
There are certain rules and regulations about water quality. It's to improve the water quality.
Okay.
So we'd probably have to look at the fine tune of the qualifications of that. And then is it improving the quality or is it just helping facilitate the businesses? So
Okay.
there'd probably be some testing that would be involved in some of that.
All right.
Any other questions for me?
I don't think so.
Okay, perfect. So I think first on the agenda, I referenced, I believe our police department information, I think. I don't have it done.
Yep.
The mayor stole my agenda, so I
Memo
don't
from
know. Okay, so I guess this is the opportunity. I'll step aside, but we'll go through police, public works and parks. And if you have questions or you want them to talk about what their thoughts were for the priority list, I'll kind of leave that up to the council. I'm not quite sure exactly what you'd like to know or,
Okay,
Go
we'll
from
take
there.
them one at a time.
okay, perfect.
Okay, so Craig? Chief Taylor? Okay. Okay, well, I'll start out. We got the information from Connor and the information and just and everyone can speak for themselves. He's recommending that we're doing it the way Baxter PD does, they're handling that. I got that with the dog. My question is, what has Teamsters done? Because we're gonna have to have it in the contract. It's gonna have to be negotiated with them, compensation things and stuff. We can't, we have to go through them because they're the sole representative for the officers. So has there been any talk on that and how that's gonna transpire?
My understanding is from talking to one of the officers that the Teamsters is not going to object to any program that we initiate that incorporates a pay raise for an officer.
Right.
But we will have to follow the Fair Labor Standards Act, which we certainly intend on doing. And if we do that, the way it's proposed by Connor, that's what he would like to see. And I don't see any reason to think that the union would object to that.
Has anyone spoken, has the union drafted any language for the contract? Have we heard anything? You haven't heard, okay. All right.
I don't have any direct communications with their union.
No. I understand that. I'm just, I've been through this a couple times where similar things have happened, only not quite this way, and it ended up being a problem. It was a housekeeping problem is all it was, but it opened up thankfully we don't have the same problems in this area that area did. But anyway, I just don't want to They just didn't want to step on the union's toes and, I'm sure they're not going to complain with somebody making more money.
Sure. And I would say that I wouldn't anticipate any issues with union, but this is a new program. It's gonna have to evolve. There's probably gonna have to be some flexibility maybe on both parts. We're gonna have to figure out, how it works in real practice and potentially make adjustments. And, make adjustments that are agreeable to the handler and the city. And I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to do that. But if we follow and I did send you guys the policy by email today, and that does lay out how Baxter does their compensation. And I think it's pretty reasonable. I talked to the police chief in Baxter, and he said for them, it equates to about $3,200 a year, the cost to the city.
Okay. Is there a way, because I know I'm sure it'll come up, is there a way that overtime, instead of paying overtime, scheduling that can be worked out so that we save because I'm assuming there's going to be call outs and other things that are involved in this, and we have no clue what they're going to be.
Right.
The policy you were mentioning, does it discuss, okay, obviously if our department calls and needs a dog, I'm assuming that he's going to go. If other departments call and he's off duty, what are we going to do? As I've mentioned to people that, all the departments work together. I mean, Breezy Point has paramedics, which is really nice to have them come down. I don't know if they come out off duty on a call.
They do in Breezy.
They do in Breezy,
Sure.
but not, okay. But what are we going to look at doing? This is a little bit different than a medical.
Well,
thing, so.
and I did talk to Chief in Baxter about that as well. And his position is that the handler has sole discretion to make the determination what he will or will not, he or she will or will not respond to.
Okay.
He doesn't want to be bothered with it. He said, that's not the right words, but he didn't want to be bothered with the decision at the time. He said if there was an issue where he felt maybe a call out shouldn't have been responded to, he will address it with the handler at a later time. Because I suppose technically, if you think about it, the time and place for a discussion about the appropriateness of a call out is not at the time when the call out's happening.
Right.
So my belief is that, and I mentioned this in my initial presentation, that if we were to have a lost child, let's say, and we're going to do tracking detail, I would not be opposed to the dog going pretty much anywhere. I mean, I think as people, we have a responsibility to assist, and if we have a tool that will help, then we will utilize it and let a jurisdiction have access to our tool. If it's a call out for a drug search, then it depends on a lot of things, I think, and the handler is going to have to make some of those decisions. But if the criteria are met for a dog to be used in a traffic search, a traffic stop and a vehicle search, there's got to be some limitations on where they can and can't go. And I think if, for example, back up a little bit, if the officer's working, they're on duty, I have no problem with them going to Breezy, Pequot, Cross Lake, even Baxter, if their dog is not on duty, because they're going to have the sibling to the dog we're purchasing. So they'll be in about their same, I think in their same point in training as we are. But if their dog's not available, I would have no problem with them going to Brainerd or Baxter to do a search. If it entails a call out for the officer to actually be, taken from off duty to respond, then we'll have to be a little more probably stingy. But that being said, all situations are a little different. And if this is and maybe we believe we have a really big case here, and that's conveyed to the handler, then yeah, we will certainly want to do what we can to help. But it is going to be a work in progress. It's going to evolve the way we look at things. It's, the more we learn what the dog can do and can't do, the more we learn what the handler is comfortable with, then, we'll make adjustments and work accordingly. And then I would anticipate that the council is going to want to review the costs at the end of the year, the overtime expenses and whatnot. And maybe you'll have recommendations of making adjustments, and we can do that.
Thanks.
Questions? I got your email this afternoon. I didn't have the time to really read it in depth, but I kind of perused it.
Mhm.
Had a couple questions. One for whoever keeps track of the time cards in the city. I'm looking under the H section, maintenance and equipment. Talking about half hour here, how many hours a day can be used for the handler. It seems that like it's very cumbersome timekeeping. Is that going to be a problem for whoever does it with the city, keeping track of the hours and who did what, when, and when they were supposed to? It's more a logistics problem.
If you're asking me, I don't think it'll be a problem. I mean, he's gonna have to certainly document on his time card what, any extra hours that he's claiming as dog training or dog maintenance. But we all will be required to pay something similar to what is being proposed to meet meet the criteria for the Fair Labor Standards Act. And I don't think it's, too unreasonable. I think it said something about not to exceed 9 hours in a pay period, maybe. I don't have it in front of me, but.
Yeah, well, it just looked to me to be a very complicated way to keep track of time and make sure it was accurate. So I just bring up the question. Another point in here, it was indicated to me that the supervision of the handler and the dog was going to be 100% through you as chief of police. And I was just wondering how that was going to work, because right now Jenny is overall everybody is that line of authority. If you want the dog to do something and Jenny says, no, we can't do that, the council doesn't like that, who's going to win the argument? I guess that's my point.
I will say this right up front. If we get into that, don't approve the dog. The chain of command has to start and end somewhere.
Right.
And if you want someone else making decisions for the police department, then you really don't need me.
Well,
I would say though, if it, like, let's use this scenario, if for some reason someone spent $10,000 in overtime, just something happened and it was just a way ridiculous and the council said, we want to talk about it, that's going to be how that progresses.
Well, that's what I said earlier, that we have to reevaluate and see what the costs end up being, but on individual call outs, no, I mean, we're going to deal with the way we deal with it.
The chain of command doesn't change just because we have a dog.
Correct. I mean,
Okay,
it's just
that's-
another, I'm the one being called when there's call outs now or overtime or whatever,
I did notice, I had a question about the rifles in the budget. Can I do that at this time?
Yeah, yeah.
$8,000 for 4 new rifles. What's wrong with the old ones?
Because tactical standards sort of change over time, and I explained in the other presentation that some of the rifles that we have were kind of the hot trick at the time because of school shootings and at one time, everybody had shotguns. Well, shotguns don't really work very well in school because you have a buckshot and you can't really control your rounds. And then they went to this particular style of gun we have, which is basically a pistol with a stock on it. And that was used because it didn't have very good penetrating power and you wouldn't have to worry about shooting through a wall if you were in a building. Well, now the trend is kind of long range combat, and the firearms we have are not very good past 50 yards or so. But that is the lowest priority request that I have for you. And our guns we have at work, they're fine.
What rifles do you have, Craig?
Currently?
Yeah.
But we have a couple of M16s, I guess they're called, and the other ones are UMPs, which are 40 caliber, short
Okay.
stock guns.
So the M4 collapsible
Yeah.
stocks on the
Yeah.
AR platforms?
Yep, yep.
Okay, were they government ones or you bought them from?
We just bought them, we actually bought them from Reed's, the couple that we had.
Yeah.
The UMPs that we bought, actually, I didn't purchase those. Those were purchased many, many, many years ago.
Okay,
And the sergeant at the time actually selected those and researched them and purchased those.
okay. And what caliber are the ARs?
Well, they'd be 223s.
223? Okay,
223s.
okay. So,
One more question.
Yeah.
There's a section in here, what you sent today about the cost of the dog. And I don't see it right offhand here. I'll do this from memory. You're talking about the police responsible for the feeding, the care. There was a whole list of different things that they had that the police was responsible for, medical. But in another section, it said that the city was going to be responsible for some of those, especially medical and stuff like that for the dog. It seemed to contradict itself. I was just wondering about.
I guess I'm not sure. I don't, it's not ringing a bell, that part of it, but I will say that the cost associated with the maintenance of the dog will be the city's responsibility. The actual application of the care of the dog will be the officers. So we will pay for the food. He's got to give them the food.
Well, you just might want to look at those two sections to see if they work together.
Yeah, I have no concerns about that. And I'm not, I don't really reluctant to say this because I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that we have secured someone to take care of the medical care of the dog for us if it should arise.
Well, I was just worried if the dog got shot and needed major surgery or something, that comes out of
that's where the
city
insurance,
funds and not police.
We have insurance, yeah.
that's where the insurance
Okay.
comes in. So, you brought that up, Don. That reminded me of another question I had was, just looking at your line item budget for food care, like vet care and all that. Are you sure you got enough? I mean,
I think so. Hope so.
okay.
I mean, that's,
I mean, I'm trying to figure out food. I don't know what kind of food they're feeding. I'm just, and
Connor put that presentation together as far as what the cost should be. And he researched it pretty thoroughly with canine handlers. So I'm
Okay.
confident that that's,
Pretty
that's how it's gonna play out. And again, like I said, there might be some surprises along the way. Maybe some of them pleasant, maybe some of them really not so much, but this is a living creature and, who knows what we may or may not have to deal with as far as medical care or, additional items that can pop up.
yeah, it looked small, low to me. That's all. That's why I was wondering, but I don't know the type of dog.
It's gonna be it's a Malinois. They're a smaller dog, but I just have to go on the recommendation that was given to me that's
No, that's
accurate.
fine.
And that's all I can really say.
Craig, I'm on board with right up to, I struggle with the overtime. I struggle with starting out with overtime. And it's something that, as Connor's pay goes up, which absolutely should, that expense will continue to just go up. Is there a way in scheduling to cover the 3.5 hours a week?
I think
So
that,
that's not overtime.
I think the Fair Labor Standards is pretty clear that you have to add additional to that. And part of the reason is this dog is going to live with this officer for many, many years, hopefully. And that's quite a commitment that he is agreeing to undertake. And there's going to be costs associated with that.
And I understand that. Is the fair labor saying that should be a time and a half, or are they just saying it's a half hour a day to cover?
Well, it's at time and a half. I mean, we're not gonna, well, see if I'm really understanding, we will allow training on duty. But really where it comes into play is the off-duty care. I mean, you have to have a half an hour every day, whether they're working or not.
Yep.
So, you know,
But I'm saying, so can you take that half hour out of his, where he comes in an hour late a day, an hour late a day, a half hour?
I think it says in the policy they're allowed to leave an hour early on their scheduled shifts for, you know, maintenance of the dog. But we're still going to have to pay for the days that the officer's not working. That's where the amount really comes into play.
But it's 3.5 hours a week, right? 7 hours a day.
You know, it's a half an hour every day they're not working. And then when they are working, like I said, I should have brought the thing in here. I did not, because it hasn't been approved and I didn't think we'd really talk about it, but most of the time will come from the off-duty hours. The days that the officer is not working. So a half an hour, paying a half an hour at overtime rate for a commitment that the officer is going to have 24 hours a day, whether they're working or not, I don't think that's unreasonable.
But for the normal use, like 3.5 hours a week or a half hour a day, the way Connor was saying was that with Baxter, they allow them to leave like a half hour early.
I think they might have said an hour early.
Mhm.
I'm not 100% sure about that, but
Is that what you're thinking as well?
I will let them, yeah, sure. You can
Mhm.
let him leave early to do his maintenance stuff, but we are, you know, so I'm clear. I mean, you still have the off
Yeah.
days.
The off days, that's
that's
the whole
where-
different issue.
That's where the issue is.
Mhm.
And that we can't avoid.
Right.
The other issue is callouts. There will be increased callouts.
Mhm.
And that's just the nature of the law enforcement job.
Yeah, and the call outs, not necessarily, I mean, that's just when you know, to start with.
The callouts we can kind of control.
So how many hours a week overtime will he get just for the care of the dog?
Well, I think it says in there not to exceed 9 hours a pay period, I think. I got to look at that again. I'm sorry. I'm a little unprepared for that part of it, but
No, that's generally what it is, 9 hours.
The way he calculated it says around 7 hours a month. So I'm
7
assuming
hours a
by
month?
month, he means 28-day cycle.
Yeah, that's what he put in there.
Okay.
Oh, that's nothing. I wouldn't even be concerned about that then. If it's 7 hours a month. No
He
problem.
says 7 hours per pay period every 2 weeks.
No, it does.
That's a month.
It does say a month.
So 7 hours overtime a month.
Yep.
Oh, what is, I'm sorry, we're looking at two different things. What is the
Oh.
policy? I think the policy might say something different that I gave you.
Okay.
The policy says 9 per pay period, 9 hours.
Not,
per pay
okay,
period.
that's, okay. That's
And-
what I was referring to, 9 per pay period. So you're looking at 8, like I said, the chief of Baxter said for them, it equates to about $3,200 a year.
Maybe this isn't the place to ask, but can forfeiture funds, if the dog is used, and let's face it, a lot of it's gonna be narcotic and drug searching and stuff. And if we have forfeitures, you know, is that something that those forfeiture funds can reimburse?
They can be, but forfeiture funds cannot be designated for anything.
Okay. That's what I was asking. I didn't know anymore.
Then if a kennel needs to be built at the handler's home, that cost is the city's also, I assume.
Yep.
Okay.
And that was in the proposal as well.
Okay.
For the initial startup cost aspect of it, which I was proposing that all of the startup stuff come out of the investments. So no impact to the budget. The only impact to the budget will be the ongoing reoccurring costs of essentially overtime.
Does he have
Food.
off kit, but does he have a list of kind of what he needs for the kennel? Because some people might have stuff they'd like to donate. Material.
He provided a pretty detailed, at least cost analysis. He didn't give me specifications on what he wanted for a kennel,
And I
but
apologize, I didn't get I think.
that was presented in the first meeting.
Oh,
So that's not
I
new.
look for email, I don't know, but anyways, that doesn't. My other last question, Peg, is there any warranty on the dog? If it doesn't perform Because again, it's a living, if it's.
Like I said, it's a living creature
I get
and,
that.
you know, I
So
mean,
there's, if we get it and it's not doing well, that stuff, it's just, it's what we have and it is what it is.
3 years, 36,000 miles.
here's again what I was told, and I'm not claiming that I'll be expert in this, I'm not. But what I was told is that the dog is being trained already in tracking and article searches. And is virtually trained in that. Has not been trained in drugs. There's a reason why. And it has to do with the availability of getting drugs. So the dog will be trained with Connor and the current owner. But drug training is easy. So there should be no concern of whether this dog has, you know, been, I think, in a long line of breeding to do this. So I don't really see any, excuse me, any concern that the dog won't perform properly. It will need to be certified. You know, it will not be used until it's certified. So if it passes certification, then it's good to go. It's deemed to be reliable and useful. The only concern would be a health issue that we are not aware of, but that's why we'll have insurance on it. So if there's something wrong where it can't perform its duties, maybe it has like hip dysplasia or whatever, and it just can't do the job, which I wouldn't anticipate would be the case. But if that were to happen and the dog can't do the job, we have to figure out what we're going to do with the dog. And that is laid out in the policy that I provided to you. And that essentially is either the handler takes it if he doesn't want it, the chief can decide to euthanize it.
Yeah, me being newer here, I guess we had a dog before, right?
Yes.
And the policy that you sent today, was that very similar to what it was back then as well?
The policy that we had back then, I think, was pretty outdated. I don't think we adhered to the Fair Labor Standards Act
Yeah.
at all.
Mhm.
And that's just not the right way to operate anyway. I think that policy dealt with more in call outs and that
Okay.
kind of thing. And
So,
as it turned out, that dog, we did not have a lot of call. That dog didn't actually live very long. We didn't
Okay.
really have it that long. So we kind of didn't get the full use of it. But when it was working, it was valuable. It did a good job. And we're probably not gonna have as many call outs as maybe you are thinking. But there will be some. Hopefully there will be. I mean, we want to help and, you know, other agencies have helped us. You know, Cass County has brought their dog over. Baxter's brought their dog. Brainerd's brought their dog up. You know, so we want to help. We want it to be utilized. But I don't think it's going to be beyond the initial purchase. I don't think that the ongoing expenses, and I shouldn't say it this way either, but I don't think it should be a real concern. I don't think it's going to be the cost of a laptop computer for us. If the math is correct that I've been told, and if I wanted to buy a laptop, we probably wouldn't even really be talking about it. It would be just go buy it. So don't get too worried. And we will have budget in mind too. If I make the decision on call outs and it's getting crazy, yeah, I'll limit them. We're not going to pay a lot of money to do enforcement work in other jurisdictions.
This policy, did you email it today?
Yes.
Can you, Jenny, make sure I didn't get it, so.
Well,
Sure.
I will look again. I could have a wrong email address for you too. I don't think so, but I'll look.
The chief also emailed it to me today, and I mentioned quickly in a response that we can work through it and have it ready to present in October. So if you have questions or concerns or, ask Craig, and then we'll keep it moving, so. And for efficiency, if Connor likes the Baxter setup, can we just get that page out of their contract and modify?
I don't think they have it. My understanding is they don't have it addressed in their union
They
contract.
don't have it,
no.
really? Okay. That surprised
This
me.
is a specialty duty that, there's no obligation that he is going to be the handler. There's no obligation that we need to continue with the program. So I'm not sure we run it in a contract. I mean, this is an extra duty that is common in a lot of departments. We are following the law. We intend on following the law. And I don't know that there would be any legitimate reason the union could oppose any decisions that we're going to make about the dog as long as we're following our own standards. In other words, what I'm saying is there won't be any grievances filed by Connor if we follow what we're laying out here. This is what he wanted. And I really don't know that the union has a whole lot they really care to say about it, as long as Connor is happy with what's going on. And if he does file a grievance, then we'll have to deal with the union and we'll see how that goes. But I don't anticipate that will be an issue at all. As long as I've been the chief, we've never had a grievance against the police department. So
It's really not an issue. What happens is, we had it happen in Hibbing, and it caused a huge deal. We had people that were deserving to get paid more, and so they ended up negotiating with management to do that. The problem with that was not that we disagreed with it, but that you can't do that. They had to negotiate through the union, and that's all. I just don't want to have that kind of a problem, which I don't know that it would ever happen. I just wanted to make sure that if nothing else, their representative may cope with it, then they can all rest in peace if they decide there's a problem later. One question I had, Craig, was, and I was kind of worried about it a little bit, is the upgrade for the purchasing of the cloud storage. I mean, that's something you got to have. I mean, how big is your current server or storage facility that you have? How many terabytes?
well, if I'd known that question was coming, I would have had Jeremy come because he knows what that stuff is. But
Okay, well, you can even throw this at him if you want, if you don't want to have to answer it now, but are we better off with cloud storage because this software is continually changing, upgrading, updating and that, or are you better off doing something here on your own?
well, I think we're better with the cloud because as things change, so will, I mean, it's this WatchGuard system. They're gonna make it
Okay.
work. What we do have to do something, we either have to do the cloud or we have to upgrade our server. And if we upgrade our server, at some point, we're probably gonna have to upgrade it again.
Oh,
So that would be an ongoing cost. The cloud, I think, we know what that is. We know what that's gonna cost. And I think it's more of we don't need to worry about it anymore. We don't need to maintain our server like we do. And we will be able to share electronic data much easier than we are right now.
And generally with the cloud storages, you have unlimited storage, where with the servers, you're limited.
Yeah, the other thing I was wondering on the cloud with WatchGuard system is how secure is the data? So somebody doesn't get in there, get the department's data that they stored there, and then we end up with people upset.
Well,
I mean, I don't know if anything's safe anymore.
Baxter, Cross Lake, Brainerd, they're using it.
Okay,
So
all right.
I'm not concerned about
You're comfortable.
concerned about security at all.
You're comfortable with
Oh,
it.
yeah.
That's fine.
I think it's far more secure than the server in our building is.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okey-doke. Does anyone else have any questions for the chief? I don't think.
No
Thanks, Chris.
questions about the secretary?
Oh. Do you want to go down that road?
What road I want to go down doesn't matter. It's the road you guys want to go down. Nothing?
Nothing? No?
Nope.
Okay. So that brings
Tom.
Amber up. I'm kidding, it's Tom.
You're the middle child.
Don't start calling me Jan.
Okay,
Shoot, I guess.
yep. Questions for Tom, reference Public Works. I want to say thank you. You put a lot of effort into that, a lot of information there. Well, I do appreciate it. So the Bobcat attachment is taken care of, the maintenance lap, the garbage cans are all taken care of. The Gator, yeah,
It's
equipment is,
tough.
yeah. Okay. So. County road maintenance and stuff. I talked to Jenny briefly about that, the $50,000. I think what we're trying to figure out is, where can we save a levy point here, a levy point there, half of one here, something like that. And you noted that there really isn't a project per se that we're aware of. But that doesn't mean, based on their history, that something might not pop up tomorrow. So for all we know. So, and then the road bond was another one that you had mentioned in there with the 17,300 annually. I'm still fuzzy on that. It was very well explained by the city administrator to me, but it only penetrates so far. And then, but those were two places that I was looking at, like the county road match and that, if, what can we do? What can't we do? I think we've put that one off too long.
Can I
To some extent.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yep, go ahead.
Do we have any funds in the road bond buildup as of now?
So what we're trying to do is, when we get to that 2025 road bond, you're gonna be making payments on that bond. And so rather than trying to go up that whole amount at one throw, we're slowly building up to it. From, I think, 2018, if I remember right, is when we started the 40-year bond cycle. And so we just completed the first one a couple of years ago. The next cycle is scheduled for 2025. And so we're steadily building up to the amount that'll be needed to service the two bonds. So for the payment on the two bonds. So anything you're building up now will end up in a reserve. Because, it's a guesstimate, but what I had predicted for a 2025 road bond is probably already changed. We've added roads, the expenses have gone up. When we get to 2025, that bond may look different than what we were predicting back in.
But are there any reserves on hand right now?
I don't know that we have a dedicated fund for it. It ends up in the general fund.
It's ended up with the large pot of money that we've been putting away, so.
You could earmark that if you wanted, I guess. You could go back and extrapolate, but to the best of my knowledge, we haven't, like Jenny said, we haven't set that aside in any way.
Correct. The other one with the county state road projects. Has there been a past amount that's been put in annually?
So we haven't done that very long. I think we did it 1 or 2 years and then COVID struck. And so we discontinued with the uncertainty those 2 years for the budget. Well, this is the first year where it feels like we're somewhat normal again, it feels like we have a little prosperity to work with. And so I was hoping to reconstitute it again. And the last time we did it, $50,000 was the amount we had tried to suggest.
Annually?
Yes.
Would you be comfortable with lower?
I think, as I stated, I don't have an amount in mind to suggest. I feel like we need to have a reserve fund somewhere set aside of maybe $100,000 without a project to reference it to. Right now, there are no county projects coming up that I'm aware of where we have to match. The state, however, doesn't give us a heads up on the projects that they're going to be doing. And some of the ones that they consider smaller, such as if they were going to repaint stoplights, to them, that's pocket change. So they don't really tell us, but it ends up being a 5-figure expenditure. So my thought was, is if we had $100,000 fund sitting somewhere, we could adjust it over time. If they hit us for a much bigger amount, or we know a bigger amount is coming, we could start jacking that up. So, you could pick anything from 25,000 to 50,000, 10,000,
But
however you
currently,
want to get there, I guess.
currently, not right now, if I understand you correctly, there's 50,000 in.
In the budget, as it's figured today, I put in 50,000.
No, not what you put in there. Do we have any funds set aside right now for
No,
those?
we don't, because the
None.
little that we did previously, we've spent that with the County Road 13 project
Would it-
intersection.
Would it be unrealistic to put that down to $25,000 per year?
I think you could set it at whatever you want.
I'm asking what you think.
I think that's fine, because in 4 years, you'd have the 100,000 set aside as long as we don't get an expense on the meantime. What I don't have is enough history to give you a good recommendation, Mark.
Mhm.
I'd like to tell you, in the last 10 years, we've seen an average of $50,000, and that's why I put that amount in there. I think I'm basing it off of some previous amounts that we have paid. What my gut feeling is we need. Mostly, I just want to avoid, probably at this point, the smaller ones, like I said, the stoplight kind of things. So I think if we had this small fund of $100,000 set aside, it would cover probably 90% of what we would get surprised with. So you could get there, if you said $10,000, you could do that over 10 years. And, if, say next year we get hit with a $20,000 one, well, we know that wasn't enough and we can increase it at that time. I just try and avoid having to bond or, have to take out of another budget somewhere if they did come up with, say, a $50,000 project somewhere that we weren't expecting.
I believe that when County Road 13, the intersection to 1377 and that was done, we ended up not having to do it, but initially we were looking at somewhere, was it 200 some $1,000 cost share initially, something like that? I believe
Yep,
it was. 'cause
It was 200. No, that's still what we
Yeah.
are paying.
We paid that?
It was a 3-year deal. I think this year was the third. But yes, we did. But they gave us a payment plan options. We didn't have to write a check in 1 year.
So
One of our
we don't
previous,
get a choice on there.
Oh, I know that.
one of our previous cost sharing, and I believe we're still paying for it, is the Pocket Park. When they redid 371, and then there were some other issues related to that, the trail that runs along. Right there by the Pretty Good Shopping, that's part of it. So if we had had a fund at that time, we could have just paid for it.
That was part of the bond.
It was, but what I'm saying is in some of those cases, we might be able to set aside enough if we did it a little at a time to not have to bond those things. We could save our bonding capacity for redoing our streets in town.
Well, I think it's important that we start doing it. I think we need to. So,
Well, I think there's been enough things over the last even 8 years that have proved we need to.
go ahead.
Question, moving on from roads. Talk to me what you would do if you didn't have the new building and grounds person.
So right now, what's driving that is we've increased the size of the city, and I think I outlined that, the population, the amount of call outs, work orders. We don't keep track of them as work orders, but they are work orders. And a lot of them were ones that I was doing, but now I'm finding myself doing more this kind of work. And so I don't have time to deal with the groundskeeping, for instance. Well, I had gotten a quote from one of our local contractors just to take care of the flower beds for here, the pickle, and a couple other spots. And it was gonna cost us upwards of $5,000 a year just to do that amount of it. The cleaning and stuff, we've added some duties to Mike Deck's responsibilities. And so I feel like if we can remove some of the cleaning and building maintenance stuff from him, he can concentrate more on the roads aspect of it.
What would happen if you didn't have that person? What would you do?
Well, we're already doing it. There's just some things that we don't do when we maybe should. We're not cleaning stuff as often as we should. I think I pointed out that we don't do any weeding. Once I set our flower beds in motion, if the weeds take over, it's, oh well. There's just certain things we let go. We don't clean our vehicles maybe as often as we could. We don't do enough preventative maintenance on buildings. It'll just start to compound. Eventually we'll get to the things that you would probably recognize as being more critical.
The 75.5 that's listed here, is that a complete cost? Does that include the health insurance and all the other things other than just plain salary?
Yeah, the amount I put in the budget covers para and all. Yeah,
Everything.
yeah.
At what step? Is that beginning step?
What I did is I put in our newest employee. I put in a similar amount, so it likely will be slightly less because he's been bumped up once or twice, so.
One of the things, again, if we're gonna, if there were to be an addition of employees, the expense, but I mean, employees are our biggest expense. We all know that. I mean, that's our, is there a way for you to reconfigure scheduling so we could cut down on some of like the on-call overtime, like for weekends and stuff? You have no control over storm cleanup, snowing, that kind of stuff. That's whatever it's gonna be. But I'm just thinking if there was a way to show that we could shift some costs from, say, overtime paid out. I mean, it's still in the budget, it's still being paid out, but it could be, maybe some of those monies could be paid towards an employee as opposed to overtime. Have you thought on that?
We have, I just don't know that this really gives us a long enough position to really start staggering shifts or something to lower that. I'd like to do that. Jenny and I have talked about this many times.
All right.
Right now I'm getting, we have times now where the overtime is exceeding the 10% I would budget. So I'm hoping this will bring us back down to where we don't have anybody going over that 10%. That's what I'm hoping.
What was, well, I suppose you'd have to separate overtime. That was like, again, storm cleanup, snow removal and stuff. If there was a way to say, okay, so that's what that was, this one person, having that additional person would save us roughly X in overtime. Is there a way to figure that out? Tammy?
So the closest thing I can say is the weekend on-call pay that we
yeah.
hand out. Everything else is usually unpredictable to a certain extent. It's a storm. It's a toilet overflowing at the pickle at 10 p.m. It's things you can't really predict.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd have to go through time cards to see exactly, what the overtime incurred was for. I mean, it's doable, but it's not as something, as easy as just going in the system, the accounting system, and looking at the cost, but it's there, it's documented. I mean, as far as the purpose, so.
Are you able to print out like last year, how much this particular overtime was for? And then what the categories are?
Not what it's for, just the employee and how much they incurred.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, the base overtime for this weekend that I'm referring to, every week we pay out 6 hours. That's their minimum that they get. They get 3 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday when they're on call. So if you had a weekend person, I guess that is, that would probably be diminished or go away.
So Tom, you're saying if we bring on another person, that overtime for the weekends will go away?
It potentially could if their normal schedule included the weekends, and if they were cross-trained in the sewer department so that they could, because that's what the on-call time is for, is in the sewer department. checking lift stations and so forth mostly, and then it's also the garbage downtown. I mean, there's potential there, I guess, but I don't want to promise that just because it hasn't, we've talked about it and it's not easily done, I guess.
Well, it's clear that every, weekend that you have the 3 hours or 6 hours or per person, is it?
For one
For
person.
One
There's
person?
one person on call on the weekend,
Okay,
and each day he gets 3 hours to do his checks and grab the garbages and check the bathrooms at the chamber.
mhm. So then you just multiply that by 52 weeks type thing?
Mhm.
And then you can come up with that amount then?
That would, yeah, that's the minimum obligation we have, I would say, for overtime in a year.
Mhm.
And everything else then is a reactionary,
Yeah,
a tree falling down. That
it'd be
kind of-
nice to see what that works out to be, how much that is, you know?
I mean, can we get a breakdown of what we count as overtime in the budget? Because that's what it is. And then how much other overtime on top of that?
Jenny said they can. It's gonna be through card by card, right? It's
Well,
not,
no, I mean, we're paying 6 hours a weekend overtime.
Yeah.
So out of all the overtime dollars, how much is just?
About
the 6 hours?
$9,500 in a year.
$9,500 a year. So $9,500 of our overtime. So how much, then what's that other amount? What's our full amount for overtime in his department minus the 9,500
Sure.
tells us what we pay in overtime during the week for things other than our weekend.
In
That would be
total,
nice
in total, the department is about $25,000 in overtime.
So it's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot more overtime beyond.
So I'm attributing most of that to plowing likely.
Plowing, it's trees falling over in a
Yeah,
thunderstorm.
that difference,
It's sewer callouts.
Luckily, that type of information can be actually documented, you know, you should be able to break that out. And then that makes it, rather than just sort of talking about it and assuming, you know, it's better to just see the numbers like that from a business standpoint. And whether, you know, like you say, and what you said, John, sometimes you can't control the weather. You know, and that's, we understand that, but to have it, rather than just say a lot of these things, it's better to have it written down. And if you can do that, that helps us a lot with a processing, at least for me, it does.
We just don't electronically tabulate that. So I
Mhm.
can't tell you that they were called out last year for 55 hours of tree removal
Mhm.
or 65 hours of snow removal.
Okay.
They have it in their timesheets or their daily log that they do,
Uh-huh.
but we don't then take that information and keep a spreadsheet where I can easily
Is there
tell
a way
you.
to code it in the software that if the computer can just tabulate it for us? You don't have to answer that tonight, just, it'd be nice over a year to kind of track and see where.
Yeah, it's easier to do it by spreadsheet. I'm sure there might be some software out there, but
I
that's
think there
something.
would potentially be just more than just 1 or 2 items. I can see where there would be maybe even a half a dozen. And then I'm creating new codes for every scenario as opposed to doing it on a spreadsheet. We can brainstorm on
Whatever way
that.
works. I'm not
Sure.
trying to
Yeah.
recreate a wheel or cause a bunch of extra work, but I do think, I mean, we're talking about a significant amount
Our,
of money. It'd be nice to know how that breaks down and if there's a way to schedule around it.
I worked on call too, and I mean, we rotated that in two, and we had to dictate every minute that was used, what it was used for, where we went, how many miles it was, that kind of stuff. And then that was entered into a spreadsheet. So at the end of the year, the management or owners of the company can go through and say, okay, this is where the bulk of our overtime is. This is kind of trivial, so we're taking these calls out and that kind of stuff. I know you can't do that. But I mean, it just kept track of everything.
When I worked for Cargill and 3M, we did that too, but
Yeah.
these smaller entities like the city usually don't get that
Well-
detailed.
Well, it'd be kind of nice to know, okay, this year we put in 400 overtime hours on snow removal. Next year
Yeah.
it might be 10. But just the ebb and flow.
The thing, I mean, is, you know, if we hire that extra person and we still are spending that amount of money in overtime, that's not, that, I mean, that's not,
And-
that's going backwards.
And if we do hire another person, can that be, will that person also help out with Parks and Rec with their upkeep of the new, you know, say the Camp Lincoln and so forth like that?
It's our intention that they would cross-train.
Okay.
How much, we don't know until we bring somebody on and we see what they're able to accomplish. I think one of the points I was trying to get across is, right now I budget 10% per man for overtime.
Mhm.
And on at least a couple of them, we're right at, and a couple of, one, at least one of them has exceeded that on a frequent basis. So what I'm trying to do is get everybody down below that 10% again, because there's a burnout factor that starts to happen when we get over that amount. And you're just, I don't think you're getting a good product for the money when they are doing that many hours of overtime. So.
I, liked how you wrote a lot of this here. I mean, I can see you put a lot of work into this, so that's nice. And the thing that I particularly liked about it was when you mentioned, when you're trying to hire another person, it's a big commitment. Not only is the salary, there's the benefits and everything, and that basically doubles the salary. So when one of the things that you mentioned in there was like the rise in what was it, sewer lines or sewer outputs, or what was that? I saw it in here.
Lift stations.
Connections. So 8% rise in connections.
Right, so it doesn't exactly affect this particular employee, but it does give you a gauge for how much the city has grown.
But what you're talking about here is a general rise in amount of work that's
Yes.
required to do that. And so that's what you're trying to use for justifying to have another person. To try to come up with those types of numbers, that's what really helps to persuade people that we really need to have another person. And without that, it's just sort of a general foggy feeling.
Sure.
And so that's why I'm saying it'd be nice to be able to take, for example, clear items like overtime.
Mhm.
And a lot of it's not recorded the way it makes it easy to understand. And I think if we make those adjustments to the program, it will make it much easier for us in the future discussions to come up with, yes, this is how much the overtime will come down, in our opinion. And these are best faith guesses, it's not absolute. Again, you can't control the weather, but as far as like steady things like 3 hours a week for one person for that overtime, 6 hours a week, that's something very steady, and that could be put into one category. So that's really what I'm from business. That's what I look for, to try to persuade me, and I'm sure others, that we need to have another person.
I think it also helps monitor after we make a decision whether to hire somebody or not. It helps us to continue to monitor the overtime and be able to, be
Right.
able to get realistic numbers. This is what it's costing, and make, either make adjustments from there, or at least we know.
Yeah, and right now you don't have the tools to do it, sounds like. You don't have the
No, I mean,
breakdown.
up till this past 6 months, half my time is
Yeah.
spent out doing.
Mhm.
And so, there's a limit to how many spreadsheets I can carry.
Yeah, right. And, that's all that you're able to have information for at this point. So I think if we can try to improve that information data point, then we can actually come up with better solutions.
Are we still looking at $25,000 equals 10%?
What kind of maintenance issues are we seeing with the Gator? How many dollars is that costing?
Well, up till now, it hasn't cost us much, but we just redid the starter on it. We did tires on it. It starts as a smaller things. It's a 2008 model. the thing with especially John Deere and like Caterpillar too, they give us a very good deal when we buy these things up front. We're, as a matter of fact, they contractually, they obligate us to keep them for 3 years because they're selling them to us below what they sell to the general public. And so what I'm trying to define, and I've done this with some help of some others and other agencies and so forth, what's the optimal time to try to keep each type of piece of equipment? And so what we're seeing is these gators, a 10 years would make sense. We've actually taken this one beyond that a little bit. So it's.
Any other questions?
Good.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Amber. Next victim. That's right. Sure.
Go with that one today.
Well, I appreciate it for the last time that we talked, being able to see the condition that some of the stuff is in was a big plus for me. I had been out there and never really looked at it that closely before, but Terry, I ran into him and he was showing me, because I was trying to picture what you had said, and it's like, yeah, okay. So, but I will, Don, do you have questions for Amber?
No, I read, went through the PowerPoint. I know, are you going through that?
The golf cart will be at the city council meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
Had questions at that point, but not now.
Okay.
I commend you on your work.
Thank you.
I know that's kind of hard for parks to see what's out there in the future, but I think you've done a lot of good things here. It'd be interesting to see what happens. How your plan comes to, vision comes to fruition.
What I like is you're coming up with the numbers,
Yeah.
you know, and they're best face guess, but
Yep,
a lot of it can be tracked.
sure.
Not to be too picky, but if the numbers were a bit bigger.
I know.
The
The one big one at the bottom is there.
Yeah. And they're gonna get
Yeah, you
bigger.
gotta zoom in on your PDF there to about 190,
Yeah.
and then you can read it. But yeah, a big thank you to Tom and Maggie for helping me with this one, go through it since Terry's not here. Terry is critical wealth of knowledge that I was dearly missing. So thanks to Tom and Maggie for filling in the gaps on some of that. And yeah, like I said, best guess, it's some numbers on paper, gives us a ballpark to kind of start playing with. And when I did not have in time for this, I am working through that rink feasibility. With Seth, will not be conducting a study. So I've reached out to a few different companies that I found through the Minnesota Ice Arena Managers Association and Minnesota Park and Rec, who do hockey arenas, hockey rinks. And specifically, I look for ones that have already done outdoor rinks. So I've contacted 4 of them. I've heard back from 2 of them. So hopefully I'll have a few more details for you in a few weeks as to what exactly that may look like and a cost estimate moving forward on that one. So that one did not make it into your information. And then also, as you guys brought up before, the buildings and grounds custodial position, Tom and I have talked about that. I put in there some of the items that are not happening regularly within Park and Rec that I think might be fitting for the potential skill set of that person if and when. I know needing more solid numbers is helpful to find the data. I think we've all kind of seen just in terms of Park and Rec, what the impact COVID did and everyone getting outside and the increase of people utilizing the park and the garbages downtown, and just how many more people, the tourism industry, and like, because they're staying close to home. And so while those aren't, there's numbers associated with it, I'm sure the chamber can get us a tourism impact number. But that's kind of some of the intangible feel and the see that we have, and trying to do our best prediction moving forward, how much of that will stay on and will not. But just like Tom said, like, we don't keep up with the weeding. That's one of the first things to go. Staining and painting may not happen as often as we like at the kiosks. I still got to get out there tomorrow and do one more. So those are some of the things that are not maybe regularly performed that I think might be a good fit for the building and grounds position, where they're not necessarily like 10 hours with parks, where it's just, this is your responsibility. And so that's kind of one way that we've talked about cross utilization. And I also think in terms of the hockey rink and whatever may or may not come to be with that, that is a totally different beast than anything else. And having a cross training and redundancy for the mechanics of that system, I think is going to be very important moving forward. And who or what that may look like. Tom and I have kind of put that one out there too. But knowing in the winter that snow removal of the roads in downtown is first and foremost, hockey always comes secondary to that. But we still have our emergencies out there as well. And knowing that, you know, it's a 16-year-old kid out there on the weekend, and just what can we do to help Terry, help me, help Public Works. If they're down someone, Terry helps them. If we're down someone to help me. So kind of try to give my best guess without talking to Terry on a lot of this stuff.
I don't have any questions.
It's just with the detail that you have in here for the best face guess, as you get more and more experience, you'll get better and better at it. So I like that.
On the community center, some of the expenses that you've outlined and stuff, how much of that does the Lions Club? Because I know they work with you quite a bit on that, don't they?
I can't give a total history on it. They do I would venture to say a regular donation of sorts. This year they donated 5,000. And I don't know if there's always been a specific thing or if it's more of a general. I don't know the history well enough, but I would say over the years there has been a lot of generosity from them. And it is gone towards improvements, but it, you know, barely makes a dent in what, you know, the replacement cost of the building will be.
I think towards certain projects, like bigger projects like the roof, I think they donated quite a bit on.
Yeah.
So there's some certain projects that come up, I think, and they've been very generous.
Yeah, they're very generous, and I just don't know the exact history of it, but I would say they do a routine investment in the community center.
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys investing in Parks and Rec and coming up with this plan with Jenny. So that'll be helpful.
All right, we will try to go through the next bit here and hopefully walk you through. So what I did was I went through 4 scenarios, trying to start from everything on the list down to what I think our base priorities have been established. So last month, we talked about everything on the list equated to that 20.09% increase. With the few changes, sorry, I got ahead of myself. So established priorities, let's talk about that quickly so we hopefully agree. The council wants to make the wage adjustment to include steps per the usual market adjustment and cost of living. We have established the priority for the Parks of the Community Center reserve accounts. And then I think the council has acknowledged that there's just general cost increases, utilities, insurance, things like that, that we have to incorporate into our budget. And typically those go up a little bit every year. So I'm using those as sort of our base level priorities. Yes. Mark. Question? No? Okay. Okay, so with that, then what I did was I said, let's talk about, or let's look at the highest levy impact. And as of today, with all of those new items factoring in, we've made some purchases this year. We've shifted a few things around. We went from the 20.09 to the 19.4 now. So that's staff, equipment, road bond, all of that, that's in this number here, the 19.4%. I also looked at the next biggest impact were really the 2 employee requests. So if we wanted to include everything except for new staffing, that would be 13.57%. From there, if we didn't include staffing, the increase to that road bond, the 17,300, there's still an amount in the budget for that. It's just not an increase. And only $25,000 in that county road bond project. We're at 11.88. And then our base budget with just those 3 priorities I mentioned before, we're at 9.79. That lines up pretty well with the tax impact scenarios I put in your packet. At least I think I had a 20%, a 15%, a 12, and a 10 or something. Anyway, so you have a frame of reference, but I wanted to at least give you some progression because I know based on conversations with each of you, trying to figure out, what your own priorities are and your goals, giving you hopefully a perspective there. I did mention to a few of you that I've spoken with that we are making great progress with our contract negotiation discussions, but as neither contract is officially settled yet, I do also like to have a little bit of room to work with that until that's finalized. It's in my mind, if it's either finalized or it's not, and I want to make sure that I leave room. So I would look to add a little bit, depending on what line you want to land, a little bit on top of that, just because the contracts haven't been completed yet. I think from there, I'm just going to check quick. I just have all of those tax impact scenario sheets on the screen. We can talk about them. But really, here's where we are. Based on the conversations today with the department heads, these options, there's certainly probably other options as well, and I can work with that. I'm just going to turn it back to the council to talk and give us some ideas or talk amongst yourself to see where you want to go with it.
I'll start.
Go ahead.
If I start looking at the police department budget in there, I don't see a justification for an office manager right now. So I'd like to take that off the table. That's me. K9 stays in. I'd like to do the watch guard crowd storage. I'd like to put the rifles off for another year. Okay, you want me to go to the next?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'll
Yeah.
keep going down.
Yeah.
As of right now with Public Works, I want to wait a year for the new position. Me, I'd like to take the 2025 road bond buildup off. I do want to do the county state road projects, but I'd like to put that at 25,000. It's just me. Keeping the fire hall and with the old equipment. And then everything for the Parks and Rec and Community Center, the rest is in all. That's where I'm at.
So what exactly do you want from us right now at this meeting?
I'd like to know what
To
number
set
you
it
want.
at.
And it's a preliminary, right? So I mean,
Yeah,
we
it's a
shouldn't lose
preliminary.
sight of, we were at 20 last month. I mean, we're, potentially, there's,
Preliminary levy where I come in at, I come in at 14% as a preliminary levy.
Right.
And
I said,
it doesn't have, it's not allowing for new staff, I understand that. But it does allow, I hope, enough flexibility should the supervisors union, should we end up settling differently than we're in, I mean, because we don't know where we're at yet. And we have a pretty good idea, and we're just waiting to hear back from them, I believe. Right?
so I can backtrack. I'm comfortable between 14 and 15%.
I guess I'm kind of falling in the same, I don't, at 14-15%, hoping to be, hoping at the end to be somewhere around 12, kind of like you had suggested, and I agree with. With the wage increases this year, I don't see it feasible to add new staff. But I'd like to say, I think we're headed in the right direction of justification for new staff, and by next year to have some more numbers, especially in the police department. I mean, how many hours a day do the officers do paperwork? How many, and maybe some, some more creative ways on the overtime and scheduling. I know it's different, than scheduling a grocery store, but you can schedule things, if it's always, later till 6 to have someone maybe work till 6, or, I mean, I don't know, but I just think that, again, as everyone knows, that's the biggest increase is wages. And when you start paying overtime, it goes up so much quicker. And especially if you're upper management and you're more, which overtime should be spread out because you don't want burnout time, but you start looking at that hourly wage and you start kicking in overtime, and it just adds up quickly. And that can be good justification for a new person. So I just want to feel comfortable that everything has been looked at, and you guys, especially Tom, you're headed definitely in the right direction with this justification and stuff. In another year, maybe tracking some overtime numbers can really help us to make a really good decision based on facts. Because unfortunately, it just isn't in the budget this year.
No.
Even if we really felt, it was justified, I can't see that. So that's my thought.
Well, I'm certainly not up at 19.4. Just an idea, it may be wacky, may be dumb, but if we included an office manager and a custodian, but we didn't start them until June, only have them on for half a year, kind of working into it, we could save a little bit there. Then out of our reserve account, we have mucho bucks in, pull another $100,000 out of that and apply it to any one of these big purchases to get it down so that we're probably sitting around 10%.
And I agree a lot with what Ross said, about as far as making sure that we try to track some of this over time and come up with this information. And as far as coming down, for me, it's anywhere from about, I would like to have it at around 15%, but I would be happy also at 12%. It'd be nice to be able to have it around that range. I agree with what John was saying too, something like that. I mean, we've come up with a good list and priorities. However, it's when it does come time to really whittle it down, that's where we really want to try to justify. And to justify, we really need that data. Without that, we're just being led by the blind, the blind leading the blind. So I'd like to see that data and to come up with the tools to help like Tom and to help Craig to be able to come up with tracking that information.
So you got three votes for roughly 10 to 12%, roughly.
12 to 15.
Well, preliminary levy.
Yeah.
Preliminary.
15, hoping to settle it around 12.
And there might be some room for what Don's saying. It's something to look at.
Right.
The one thing you have to remember is, we do have substantial savings, which is a good thing. But 50% of that savings is already set off to the side, so to speak, because we have 1 year's budget in the bank.
Yep.
As a safety net. And we have been using that fund, but for things that are being reimbursed, even if not over a period of time, like the fire truck and things of that nature, the truck for Parks and Rec, and having the ability to do those kinds of things does save us money in the form of interest and, you know, so, and we, you know, when you can just stroke a check, you can generally get a better deal when they know that you have the cash to pay it now. So not disagreeing with what you're saying, it's everything should be on the table and looked at. I agree with that 100%. But once we get rid of it, it's gone. Once you spend it, it's gone. So
Yeah, I guess I've always been this way and I'll continue to be this way. I have a problem using our savings for operating budget.
thank you.
Now, if we take that and we, you know, because we did apply some, right, to Park and Rec, you know, that, to go into that fund, what was it, 100,000?
100,000 for each
100,000
For
for each, that. I
capital
think is-
purchases.
I think that is a great use of money and will save in the budget later. And so if we wanted to take some of that and move it towards the road bond or move it towards, I'm fine with that, but for operating stuff, it's just the cost of doing business and we either that or we cut services. That's just always been my view on it.
People have to decide what they want, so, or don't want. Okay. Is there anything else?
Well, so I heard 3 members say 14 to 15%. I heard one say 12 to 15 and one say roughly 10. So if I go to that 14 to 15 and split the difference, can I set it at 14 and a half?
For a preliminary.
Preliminary.
For
Yeah, well, yeah, for
yeah.
tonight, then we don't have to,
Do you
Yep.
need a motion on that?
no, it's a workshop. I'm just
Okay,
gonna
thank you.
take your head
Um,
nods as okay and
I'm good with that.
All in favor? Aye.
Don, are you okay with that?
No, but I'll go along with it.
Okay.
So, okay, can I,
preliminary. And your
can I-
suggestions are
Nothing if
great.
not
They
on
they
it.
are.
Oh,
So
I
think
always
that's
appreciate your, and
I
I
think
know,
it's
I know where
worth-
you're coming.
worth
Jenny,
it.
can I clarify one thing?
Yes,
When I ask for justification, it's not just for me, it's for like the taxpayers. Because if they're gonna come to me and say, why this, and this, I would like to know why the department has wanted it, so I can explain it that way. I know why they want it or need it, but
Just
Thank
say
you.
the console is a road console.
Is there anything else?
no, we are done. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
and we can take a motion to adjourn. Or do we need to?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll reconvene at 7. Perfect.
Oh. It'd be the high price city.